Police stormed through doors in a coordinated dawn raid. Safe houses, flats, residential streets that seemed normal until moments earlier. Doors splintered under forced entry. Flashlights swept rooms. Officers found cash hidden inside couches. They discovered kilos of product stored in plain sight. In total, police seized around 6 kilos of white powder and a quarter kilo of speed. They also recovered more than 122 in bundled cash. Stacks of notes were wrapped in plastic. They were buried behind belongings, buried in drawers, concealed in cars.
It was such a perfect antidote to being an actor.
Its top was controlled by 2 brothers, Anthony and Bradley Gill. Supply came from Manchester into Blackpool. Distribution spread across towns via courier networks. But the key moment of truth came with 1 car and 1 recording device. Investigators had bugged a Ford Fiesta used by Scott LeDrew. He was the gang's main cash collector. Microphones hidden in the vehicle captured conversations that broke the case. Jessica Lang's voice was among them. She sat in the passenger seat. She guided LeDrew. She told him where to hide bundles of cash after pickups. She instructed him to conceal the money. Her voice was calm, measured. It took very little time for police to see she was more than a passive observer. Another key moment happened in a retail car park. At a B&Q store, LeDrew and Lang met with lower-level dealers. Bundles of cash exchanged hands. Lang pointed to where the money should be hidden. That casual gesture became critical courtroom evidence. It was routine for the gang. For police, it was confirmation. She was actively managing the flow of cash. The investigators had grown used to encrypted chatter. They intercepted EncroChat devices. They cracked coded words. Tuna meant money. There were no direct mentions of white powder in messages. Everything was obscured. Yet the system fell apart under surveillance and audio recordings. Every move left a trace. Lang's involvement stood out in a field of men. Couriers like Joseph Murphy and John Casey transported illegal substances across towns. Distributors like Declan Morgan and Stephen Miller handled street-level sales. Collectors like LeDrew gathered cash. Even an ex-boxer, Jack Arnfield, was caught taking weed from the gang to settle debts. Every person fitted a slot. At the structure's center was the Gill brothers. Anthony sourced the white powder. Bradley managed logistics in Blackpool. Lang and LeDrew operated in the middle, ensuring money crossed lines. For investigators, the raids closed the loop. Suspected stash houses now revealed their secrets. Kilos of product, bundles of cash, proof of the chain. First arrests dropped quickly. Anthony Gill in Manchester, Bradley Gill in Blackpool. Lang was detained with the others. LeDrew was arrested soon after. Couriers and distributors followed. Within 48 hours, the network had collapsed. At the heart of it lay one quiet young woman. Jessica Lang was only 21, a student in hairdressing, a mother. Still, she sat in the car, instructing. Her presence rewrote how police saw the case. She appeared ordinary, but her involvement was recorded. Every word she spoke in that car became evidence. News outlets published stills from the body cam footage. Lang's face, serious, composed. One clip showed her standing over stacks of cash. Another showed her speaking into the car window. Those images confirmed what police had suspected. Neighborhoods struggled to accept her role. She blended into everyday life. Few had suspected she might be part of a cross-county substance ring. That contrast made the revelation even more striking. On the evidence table were recordings, photos, cash, and product. Police laid them before courts. They constructed a case built on surveillance. They built it from the bottom up. Every meeting, every handover, every murmur inside the car fed into the story. That story ended not with a whisper but with locked doors and flashing lights. It ended with the arrest of a young mother and student who had sat in the backdrop of a £3M trafficking network. And it began there, with the crashes of doors, the shine of torches, and the sight of concealed white powder and cash, all finally exposed. Jessica Lang was a student and a young mother. She was just 21 years old. She studied hairdressing while living in Grange Park, Blackpool. On the surface, her life seemed ordinary. She looked like any other young woman balancing family life with education. That outward normality made her eventual role in a major substance conspiracy so startling. Her brothers, Anthony and Bradley Gill, were already deeply involved in corruption. Anthony was 33 and Bradley was 28. Together they built a network that controlled large amounts of white powder, weed, and speed. Their reach extended from Manchester into Blackpool and surrounding areas. They had contacts, couriers, distributors, and collectors. At the top of it all, the Gill brothers coordinated shipments and managed the flow of money. Jessica Lang was linked to the operation through both family and her partner. She was the sister of Anthony and Bradley. She was also in a relationship with Scott LeDroux. He acted as the gang's main cash collector, a trusted figure in handling the movement of criminal profits. Through those ties, Jessica moved inside the heart of the group. Her position was not at the level of her brothers. She was not importing substances or hiring couriers, but she was trusted to support the network and to act as a bridge between family and partner. Evidence gathered during the police investigation highlighted that trust. Recordings showed Jessica giving directions about how to hide money. She passed instructions on during car journeys. Surveillance revealed her presence at handover points. She was not just there passively, she was speaking, guiding, and making sure things went smoothly. One moment stood out during the investigation. At a B-Q car park, police surveillance recorded her telling LeDroux how to bundle cash into bags. The exchange was part of a much bigger operation. To outsiders, it looked like an ordinary meeting. But inside the car, criminal slang and coded language were used to hide transactions. The gang relied heavily on coded speech. They talked about tuna when they meant money. No one ever said white powder or weed loud. But investigators eventually cracked the code. They pieced together who was talking, what was being exchanged, and where the money flowed. Jessica's voice was among those recorded. It showed that her role went beyond simple presence. She was part of the mechanics of the operation. While her life in Blackpool appeared calm, LeDroux was a constant figure in the active side of the network. He drove around the area collecting money from street dealers. He delivered those sums directly to the Gill brothers. Lang was often with him. She was by his side during cash runs. That consistency connected her to the rhythm of the conspiracy. Court documents later revealed her defense. They argued she was a young woman, a mother, and a student. They said she was vulnerable and not an organizer. They painted a picture of someone drawn into misconduct because of family and relationship ties. But the prosecution pointed to the tapes. In those recordings, she was not silent. She was speaking, instructing, and showing knowledge of how the money should be handled. That was the evidence that made her complicit. The wider network involved many other names. Joseph Murphy and John Casey acted as couriers, driving product from Manchester to Blackpool. Declan Morgan and Stephen Miller were part of the distribution side, selling to local dealers and street users. Cash collectors like Darrell Wellings and Bradley McSpirit handled money runs, ensuring profits were gathered and delivered to the Gills. Even former professional boxer Jack Arnfield became caught up, linked to the movement of soft substances used to pay off debts. Phone records tied all of these individuals together. They used coded conversations, avoiding direct mention of the substances. Still, the consistency of their contact and the patterns of their movements gave investigators the map of the organization. Lang's name surfaced within those files, never as the top decision-maker, but as a trusted enabler. Her involvement mattered because she was reliable, close to both her brothers and her partner. The Gill brothers ran the operation like a business. Anthony was responsible for sourcing kilos of product. Bradley oversaw couriers and ensured deliveries happened on time. Lang and LeDroux acted in the middle, bridging the gap between high-level supply and lower-level distribution. Beneath them were younger members, carrying out deliveries, storing, or collecting small amounts of cash. It was structured and deliberate, built to avoid detection and maximize profit. Operation Janet, the police investigation, later showed just how extensive it was. Between May 2016 and July 2017, the gang was linked to at least 28 kilograms of white powder alone. That represented nearly £3 million in street value. There were also large amounts of weed and speed moved. The money flowed steadily, hidden in shopping bags, cars, and coded notes. Jessica's role, while not central, added to the gang's confidence. She gave them a sense of cover. To the outside world, she was a student, a mother, a quiet young woman. Few would have suspected her of being involved in an international illegal substance operation. That facade made the gang feel untouchable. It was precisely that sense of invisibility that police worked so hard to break down. By the time the case reached court, the contrast between Jessica's two identities became a point of focus. On one side was the image of a young mother working towards a hairdressing qualification. On the other was a participant in an empire worth millions. That clash made the case resonate far beyond the courtroom. People looked at her and struggled to understand how an ordinary life could hide such deep involvement. For the investigators who spent months following the gang, the lesson was clear. Organized corruption does not always show itself through obvious characters. Sometimes it hides behind ordinary faces. Jessica Lange's story became one of those reminders, proof that even those who appear most normal can be connected to something much darker. Detectives began with suspicion. They linked the Gill brothers to widespread substance activity. They knew something bigger was going on, but they didn't have proof. They tracked patterns, cash movements, phone signals. They spotted irregular trips. They listened to coded exchanges. They monitored addresses. They used covert surveillance. Unmarked cars followed known associates. They recorded meetings in public spaces. Handovers often happened in car parks. They watched them without moving in. Phones became vital. Encrypted devices are rarely named. Investigators pieced logs together. They matched numbers. They mapped networks of contact. Names emerged. One name stood out: Jessica Lange. If you're still with us, consider subscribing for more. She was seen arriving at known stash locations. She was spotted across jurisdictions. She was not a foot soldier. She was a handler. She moved with purpose. A Ford Fiesta attracted interest. It was seen at multiple handover sites. LeDrew, the regular driver, was known to police. Detectives planted a bug inside the car. It was a major technical operation. It took nights of preparation. Once the microphone was active, the car was bugged. Every journey yielded clues. Lange's voice featured in multiple exchanges. She helped direct money runs. She guided cash placement. Her tone was casual. Her control was clear. That recording became the backbone of the case. Police reviewed hours of audio. They logged every directive. They flagged phrases. They tied them to cash drops. They logged her on the tapes. One clip stood out. In a BQ parking lot, she whispered, "Instructions." It was not loud. It was instruction. The moment was simple, but critical. Meanwhile, raids were planned. They coordinated across 3 counties. Teams drafted lists. They knew locations. They had warrants. Timing was crucial. They synchronized hours. Agents moved in at dawn. They struck in Blackpool, Leeds, and Kettering. They hit stash houses and addresses linked by surveillance. They cut off escape routes. In one townhouse, they found hidden bricks of white powder. In another, speed stashes. In all, they uncovered nearly 6 kilos of Class A substances. They collected cash in bins and drawers. They recovered more than 120 twok, but the audio evidence still carried weight. Lawyers and officers sat in offices. They listened. They logged. Every link was laid bare. At the same time, phone data filled gaps. They confirmed who contacted whom. They tracked frequency. Lange came up repeatedly, especially in the days before raids. That raised her status in the investigation. She was no longer invisible. She was central. They suspected she bridged family trust and operational need. Detective summaries reflected that. They called her a key facilitator. They said she was trusted by both the Gill brothers and LeDrew. They noted her youth and motherhood, but they stressed her role nonetheless. By the time arrests hit, the picture was complete. It was no longer speculation. Every element, audio, surveillance, phones, physical evidence aligned. At midday, entries went in. The doors were broken. Officers shouted commands. Lange was found inside one address. She was arrested without resistance. She stood calm. She said little. At that moment, the investigation finished its climb. Months of work had produced a full view inside the network. Lange's voice, recorded and matched to tasks, anchored her in the case. They read her rights. They took her to the station. They told her she would face charges. At that point, the escalation was complete. She was no longer a student caught in between. She was a defendant with recorded proof. That marked a turning point. Police now had enough to take the case to court. Every layer of the operation had been exposed, and Lange was right at its heart. The case reached court in autumn 2018. It was heard at Preston Crown Court. Jessica Lange faced a jury. She pleaded not guilty. She denied involvement. But the recordings spoke for themselves. The prosecution laid out the whole picture. They showed surveillance footage. They played audio tapes from the bugged car. They revealed encrypted messaging decoded by police. Every piece painted one truth. Lang was more than a bystander. A prosecutor told the court about her role. They said she guided vital parts of the operation. They showed how she advised cash concealment. They stressed her position within the family network. Lang's defense argued differently. They stressed she was a 21-year-old student. They pointed to her responsibilities as a mother. They emphasized she had no criminal past. They presented her as someone caught in a family circle. Defense counsel asked for prudence. They urged jurors to consider her context. They suggested pressure from family ties overshadowed her choices. The jury listened in silence. They heard medical, financial, and technical evidence. They weighed every piece of tape, every call, every movement. Then the verdict arrived. Lang was found guilty of conspiracy to supply white powder and weed. The judge confirmed the jury had seen enough. She had played a part in a multi-million-pound network. Sentencing followed swiftly. Lang received a 5-year prison term. She was taken into custody immediately. Her lawyers confirmed she would appeal. By contrast, the Gill brothers received stern sentences. Anthony and Bradley Gill each got 14 years. LeDrew was sentenced to 11 years and 4 months. Their roles were deemed more central, but Lang's participation was still significant. Outside the court, the media gathered. News outlets called her life cool and controlled. Headlines described her as the gangster's mole. They questioned how a hairdresser became part of such a vast operation. Community voices echoed that tension. Neighbors said they never suspected her. Some admitted they had defended her lack of links to misconduct. Her disappearance from public life suited that belief. Her arrest shattered it. The case also sent warning ripples through law enforcement circles. Policing bodies flagged the ease with which relatives could slip into the trade. They warned about the risks when family loyalty blends with criminal opportunity. Judicial reviews later cited the case. It became part of training for detecting hidden hands in criminal networks. Lang's presence was held up as a reminder that not all conspiracy leaders wear suits or broadcast themselves online. In prison, reports said Lang maintained a low profile. She kept head down. She completed required programs. Her lawyers noted she expressed regret, though details stayed private. Public discussion evolved too. The commentary emphasized the role of family ties in criminal exploitation. It questioned whether better support for young parents could prevent similar outcomes. Later, in 2021, a criminologist referenced her case in academic discussion. They described a growing trend of young women becoming hidden facilitators in male-dominated networks. Lang's situation was cited as a turning point example. The Gill brothers' case faded from headlines over time, but inside police circles, it still resonated. Investigators reminded newer recruits that surveillance, mixed with patience, broke the case. Lang's role stood out: ordinary facade, extraordinary participation. In short, the courtroom drama stripped away appearances. A student hairdresser became a convict within an empire. Justice followed the evidence. The sentence was firm. The shock reverberated beyond the dock. And it closed a chapter on Operation Janet, but opened vital conversations about trust, family, and law breaking.